Marcus Aurelius had generals who hated him, senators who plotted against him, men who whispered that he was weak, too philosophical, unfit to lead. And here's the thing, they were right about some of it. They saw his hesitation. They saw his doubt. They saw the cracks his closest advisors were too loyal to mention. Your enemies are watching you without the filter of affection. That makes them dangerous. It also makes them useful. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why the people who dislike you carry information about yourself that your closest friends never will, and how to extract that intelligence without letting it destroy you. Your friends edit what they tell you. Your enemies don't. Nietzsche's inner circle told him his work was brilliant. His critics, the ones he called resentful, the ones he argued with publicly, were the ones who forced him to sharpen his thinking. The friends celebrated. The enemies pressured him to become more precise, more rigorous, more honest. When his sister controlled his legacy after his breakdown, it was the hostile academic establishment, not his fans, that eventually corrected the record. Hostility created accountability where admiration created blind spots. Friendship introduces what psychologists call the positivity bias. People who care about you unconsciously soften negative feedback to protect the relationship. An enemy has no such incentive. They will say the thing your friends rehearse in their heads and decide not to say. That unfiltered signal, as uncomfortable as it is, contains data. Not all of it is accurate. But the pattern, the repeated criticism, almost always points to something real. Enemies see your public self, not your curated self. That's closer to reality. Think about Theodore Roosevelt. His political enemies called him reckless, impulsive, a warmonger playing soldier. His friends called him visionary, courageous, decisive. History landed somewhere between the two, and the critics were actually more useful in keeping him from overreach. The people closest to him in the White House wanted him to succeed. His opponents wanted him to fail. Wanting him to fail meant they watched every decision with maximum scrutiny. That scrutiny is a mirror. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the parts of yourself you don't acknowledge, don't integrate, don't want to see. Your friends collude in keeping the shadow hidden because they love the version of you they've chosen to believe in. Your enemies, operating without that collusion, often react to exactly the shadow material you've been suppressing. When someone's criticism makes you furious in a way that feels disproportionate, that's almost always the shadow talking. The anger is data, not just emotion. The specific language your enemies use reveals how you're perceived outside your own narrative. Abraham Lincoln was called a baboon, an ape, a crude backwoods lawyer by his political enemies, men who thought him unfit for the presidency. Lincoln paid attention. Not to the insults themselves, but to what those insults revealed about how power was being perceived. He was seen as an outsider, as someone without sophistication, as someone easily underestimated. He used every single one of those perceptions strategically. He let opponents underestimate him. He leaned into the plain-spoken image. He weaponized the way his enemies saw him. Epictetus taught that you do not control what others think of you, only how you respond to it. But there's a level beneath that. Before you respond, you have to listen. The specific words an enemy chooses are a compressed version of how a neutral observer might also see you under pressure. Strip out the malice and what's left is a description. Descriptions are useful. They tell you how your behavior lands when no one is trying to protect your feelings. Sustained opposition builds the kind of resilience that comfort never can. Seneca wrote most of his clearest thinking while under Nero's suspicion, knowing he might be killed at any time, operating under the watchful hostility of the most powerful man in Rome. He didn't produce that work in spite of the pressure. He produced it because of it. The hostility forced him to be exact. He couldn't afford a lazy argument. He couldn't afford vague comfort. He had to mean every word because every word might be his last. Compare that to philosophers who spent their careers surrounded by admirers. The work is often thinner. Stress inoculation is a real psychological phenomenon. Controlled, manageable adversity builds the neural pathways for handling future adversity. An enemy who consistently challenges you professionally, intellectually, socially, is providing that inoculation whether they intend to or not. The man who has never faced sustained opposition has never discovered what he's actually made of. He only knows the version of himself that his support network has reflected back to him. That version is incomplete. The enemy who wants you to fail will notice your failures before you do. In business, the clearest signal that a company is in trouble often comes not from internal reports but from competitors who are circling. Jeff Bezos built a culture at Amazon that explicitly studied what competitors were saying about Amazon's weaknesses. Not to feel bad about them, to fix them before the market punished them. He institutionalized the enemy's perspective as a quality control mechanism. He understood that people who wanted Amazon to fail were paying closer attention to Amazon's vulnerabilities than the people who worked there. Motivated attention is real. An enemy is highly motivated to find your weak points. That motivation makes them thorough in a way that even a well-intentioned critic rarely is. The Stoics called this a more fatty love of fate, including the difficult parts. You don't have to love your enemies. But you can love the function they serve. They are a stress test running in real time. Every weak point they find is a weak point you now know about. Here's what we covered. 1. Your friends edit their feedback to protect the relationship. Your enemies don't. That unfiltered signal, stripped of malice, contains real data about how you're landing in the world. 2. Your enemies are reacting to your shadow, the parts of yourself you haven't integrated. When their criticism makes you disproportionately angry, that's the signal worth following. 3. Sustained opposition builds the kind of resilience that a comfortable life surrounded by supporters never will. The men who know themselves best are almost always the men who have been seriously opposed. Not because suffering is noble, but because pressure reveals what ease conceals. Use the information. Don't carry the bitterness. If this landed for you, subscribe. We put out one video every Tuesday and Friday, no motivation fluff, no empty affirmations. Just the philosophy that actually holds up when things get hard. Hit the bell so you don't miss it.